The Baltimore Ravens have to put the Bills game behind them as they get ready for a reunion with Joe Flacco and the Cleveland Browns as they head over for the season opener in Baltimore.
Speaking of the Cleveland Browns, they don't care what the record is for Baltimore. They're trying to get a victory. Time for Baltimore to get their minds right.
The Ravens definitely cannot start the season 0-2. A lot of preparation goes into this week. We have injury updates, conversations about John Harbaugh, and a lot more coming up on the Locked On Ravens Squad show.
Rise and shine. It's the Ravens Squad. Everything Baltimore Ravens every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Charm City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Flock together and squad up. The Ravens Squad show starts now.
What's going on, Flock Nation? Welcome to another edition of the I'm
the one on the screen.
You're the one on the screen.
I was trying to mouth what you were saying, so that
switch it. That's awesome. Welcome to another episode of the Ravens Squad Show. I am your host, Samuel Njoku, joined as always with Kevin Oestreicher and Kadri Ismail. It has been a few days since the Ravens lose a heartbreaker to the Buffalo Bills. It's time to recap and move on because there's still 16 games left in the regular season for the Ravens to play. We'll touch on that. I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. We are here 7:30 p.m. Wednesday. I know a lot of Ravens fans are used to us being here on Thursday at 7:30, but we don't want to coincide with your football watching Thursday night football games, so we're going to be moving to Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. and then the post-game show every Sunday or Monday or Thursday or whenever the Ravens play. This will be Sunday coming up, post-game show after the Ravens hopefully pick up the victory against the Cleveland Browns. So I appreciate you guys for joining us. We're going to touch on a little bit because if you're a Ravens fan, you can't escape it. The national media has been touching on what has been going on with the Ravens loss to the Bills. We'll touch on that. We'll touch on the Ravens versus Browns. We'll get our predictions. We'll close out our thoughts on week one. But first, we want to touch on what's going on between the Ravens being unable to close out games. The main man behind all of this right now, at least nationally and sometimes locally, is John Harbaugh. The perception of John Harbaugh has changed. Many consider him to be a top 5 head coach, but people are putting the blame of this loss and other losses in the past on John Harbaugh. Q, I will start with you because you're at the facility a lot and you get a chance to talk to these players and get an understanding from other media members what's going on with this team. What is your thoughts on the perception of John Harbaugh after that grueling, heartbreaking loss to the Bills?
Well, I will say this. John Harbaugh, yes, he is an amazing coach, an excellent coach, a top 5 coach, if you will. When it comes to the bigger picture of wins and losses, there are 2 people that you're going to be looking at, Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh. Those are the 2 guys that when everyone is talking about legacy, you look at the wins and losses of the head coach and of the quarterback. With that said, John, well before the Lamar Jackson era, but even into the Joe Flacco era, when he started this tenure as the Ravens head coach, there were times and moments in games where he's had a commanding lead, his team, and that's where he failed to finish. His teams did not close the deal, but rather the opposing opponent came back and wound up winning. Now, with that said, this offseason was supposed to be an offseason in which you had made the proper corrections when it came to the Bills and what you did as incorrect in the playoff divisional round that got you that loss. This is supposed to kickstart into the win now mentality because the roster is so stacked. Checking off all the boxes, the Ravens offense put up 40 points. The Ravens special teams had critical lapses. The Ravens defense was non-existent at harsh, critical moments in the game. And so with that, yes, the head coach needs to look at all 3 phases of his team and recognize that he is the final decision maker. The buck stops with him, all the cliches you could think of, and recognize I did not do enough to finish and help my team win. There are small decision-making things to help your team be in a great position to win. And John Harbaugh, the pattern has been there before. He has failed to get his team over the hump, and we saw it on full display against a very good Buffalo Bills squad.
You know, I've seen throughout social media today, yesterday, not just the recent collapses from John Harbaugh-led teams, but, you know, you can go back to, and this is a season I will never forget, 2014. I talk about it maybe once a month just on Locked On Ravens. I will never forgive the Ravens for not winning a Super Bowl that year. They were up by 14 twice.
To the Patriots.
Against the Patriots twice, and they couldn't get the job done. You know, there was obviously the game against Cincinnati where they were so close to making the playoffs. And of course, Cincinnati knocked him out on that Tyler Boyd play. There's that graphic that just expands. It's like the Browns quarterback jersey. It just goes forever. You know, if you've seen that picture, and it has like the Browns, so there are a bajillion quarterbacks and the names. It's like the Ravens, every like little lead that they've had. And again, the messaging from John Harbaugh, and Q and I talked about this morning, and I've talked about it on Locked On Ravens over the course of the week, is that his comments, particularly about, hey, we've been up in a lot of games, so of course maybe that has something to do with it. That just, it doesn't sit right with me personally that was the messaging there. And it didn't shock me because we've heard John Harbaugh take that approach before. And look, yeah, is he correct that they've been up in a lot of games because they've been good? And that will lead to percentage-wise more leads blown, I guess technically, but that doesn't excuse what's going on the field, because when you have a good roster like this one and a good team like this one, obviously, like, this is week one. The season is not over, and I've been trying to stress that. I know that the way that it happened made it feel like that, right, as it was going on. You're just like, are you kidding me? But there are still 16 games for this team to go and hopefully win and get back on track. But it's just the continuous trend. And yes, something that Q mentioned this morning was that it's like, okay, well, you look at it, and Q made the point of like, well, Joe Flacco in his prime, and then Lamar Jackson in his prime, and this stuff is still happening. And what's the common denominator? That is Lamar Jackson. And I thought that was a great point you made, Q. Or it's John Harbaugh, not Lamar Jackson. I was going all over the place, but it's John Harbaugh. So in my opinion, what you have is a situation where it's like, there's no shield anymore here. I'm not saying John Harbaugh is going to get fired like tomorrow. It's going to be the whole season. He's going to have this, but I do think this is the last chance for him. And I guess you start it up this week. Go get a win, because if you don't, you start 0-2 again. It's going to be a problem, I think, for sure, because especially with the schedule they have, you just can't afford to start slow like you did last year.
I can't. That comment about John Harbaugh just made my blood boil. Yeah, you've been up a lot, so yeah, of course the percentage. You know how hard it is to lose a game when you're up 2 scores in the first half. It is in the second half. It's almost impossible to lose like that. Excuse me. Let's touch a little bit more on this, because my perception of the season, at least in my opinion, has changed. Yes, there is a lot that the Ravens can do between now and January to get ready, but it just seems like this is a mental thing with the Baltimore Ravens. It just seems like the Ravens cannot get out of their own way. They're up 40-25. It just seems as though there was no chance that the Ravens were going to lose that game, and then they wound up doing it. You mentioned the shield is off. The public perception of John Harbaugh has indeed changed. It seems like though the seat is hotter than it was this time last season. When the Ravens lost in week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs, they were a toe away from tying that game up and potentially winning it. The perception wasn't as dire as it is now. For whatever reason, the national media has caught up to our strong alt fan base that have been totally against John Harbaugh from the start. Do you think that it's put up a shutter time for John Harbaugh? If he loses in the postseason in the same fashion he lost in week 1, could we be seeing the last of John Harbaugh in Baltimore, Kevin?
Yeah, I think so. And Q, I think, I see, not an agreement for those who listen in audio form. All of us, I think, are on the same page here, where, look, I know that some people, and I think it's very split between people just like absolutely despising John Harbaugh and people thinking he's a great coach and loving him. I think John Harbaugh is a good coach, but there are these flaws and these trends that just continue year after year, and someone can be a good coach and not be the right coach. right? And I think John Harbaugh for a while, he was, early in Joe Flacco's tenure, obviously the rookie year AFC championship, the two of them went to against Pittsburgh, and obviously the Super Bowl win. They were very successful, that duo, in the postseason. And then you start to see philosophies change, the roster kind of turns over. And, at the end of the day, Harbaugh being a coach with the same team for as long as he has is unheard of. And we see John Harbaugh consistently in some of these situations, whether it's poor time management, whether it's game planning. And a lot of people we know, they go to the play callers, right? Oh, Todd Monken called this too conservatively, Zach Orr, he wasn't aggressive enough. Well, sure, they deserve some blame. I'm not saying they're absolved of everything here, but you know what? At the end of the day, and this is something I've talked about all week, John Harbaugh is the head coach. His title is head coach. He has direct influence on how this team is coached, on how those play callers call plays. And while he is not the one with the headset, relaying those calls over, that is the big thing here, where you talk about just philosophies and how things work. John Harbaugh can win a Super Bowl with this team this year. This Ravens team can win the Super Bowl this year. Again, I'm not declaring their season over because of one week one loss. It's just the trend that has continued. And something I said on the show a couple days ago was that we couldn't even get through 1 week without having something like this happen. After all we heard in the offseason about how it's going to be different, they're motivated, they're tired of finishing where they want to finish. And I'm not saying all that's false, but clearly something has to change. I'm not calling for a firing right now because guess what? It's not going to happen until after the season if it does happen. But I do think that if John Harbaugh, at the absolute minimum, I'm not even sure this is enough, but at the absolute minimum, John Harbaugh has to make the AFC Championship game again, if not go to the Super Bowl or win it. Because if that does not happen, it's just another disappointing divisional round exit or a disappointing wild card exit. You're just doing the same thing. You're having the same season over and over and over again. And by the way, Lamar Jackson still has a long road ahead of him in terms of his career. He's going to be 29 at the end of this season. He's not 24 anymore, right? Still has a lot of years left, but every year you don't win the Super Bowl, or at least be like at the top of the top and competitive, and that like, oh yeah, you represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. That's a year you're wasting of Lamar Jackson's prime. And this year in particular, look, I know John Harbaugh's kind of shut down the Super Bowl or bust talk. I know he doesn't really believe in it, but it's there. He can talk about that all he wants. It is 100% there with this roster because it's going to look a little different after this season.
Yeah, he's looking a little silly. I think we mentioned Super Bowl or bust a few weeks ago, and Harbaugh's response to that on the podcast over there in the official Baltimore Ravens website was that, Super Bowl or bust doesn't really mean anything to him. Well, he saw it loud and clear after losing a shot at actually getting the win. They stole defeat out of the jaws of victory, it felt like, and they found a way to screw up big time. And again, the Bills, their schedule, I think, it's soft compared to the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens have a grueling 6-game stretch ahead of them. The Bills, they play in the AFC East. Enough said about that. So I think that regardless of the outcome of this game, the Bills are probably going to have a higher seed than the Ravens unless the Bills collapse and the Ravens have a monstrous stretch of games upcoming. I think they'll need to win, 15 of their next 16 games to get that one seed. I think the Bills' schedule is that promising for them. So in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. But the concern for me, and it's a concern for a lot of Ravens fans, is what we're seeing now is just the same thing we've seen every single time. And there's no reason for any Ravens fan, at least now, to think that what happens now won't happen in January. But I still think this Ravens offense is fantastic. I mean, they put up 40 points in a defense that was legit trying their best to stop the run and could not do it with Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry was a man among boys, man among infants, it looked like. And, of course, Lamar Jackson was being Lamar Jackson. So a lot of positives to take away from this, in my opinion, but it seems as though the Ravens are going to have a lot of soul searching to do. We'll talk about it in a couple of segments about what this may mean for the Ravens in their Week 2 matchup against the Cleveland Browns. But we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will touch on our final thoughts on this game because, talk about John Harbaugh in this, but he's not the only reason why the Ravens lost. We'll touch on some of the good and some of the bad in that Ravens-Bills matchup before finally moving on to the Cleveland Browns. We'll touch on this next here on the Ravens Squad Show. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff. with a can't miss offer right now. New customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building the same game parlay, or even jumping in live in on the action. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We are back here with the Ravens Squad show. Again, we're here twice a week, once on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, and once after every Ravens game. So you'll get a post-game reaction with everything that's going on here with the Ravens as they try and attempt to right the wrongs of week one and make a trip to the Super Bowl. We're hoping it happens, but we had to get through week one first. Week one, the Ravens do lose 40-41 after having a 15-point lead late into the second half. Let's touch on the defense because a lot needs to be talked about in concerns with the defense. The Ravens brought in Malaki Starks. They got Mike Green. You know, Trenton Simpson looked like he had a decent outing in the preseason. Chidobe Awuzie steps in another season out of TJ Tampa. Lots and lots of things going on, and it seems as though the Ravens fell short again in stopping the big-time QB. Let's push the agenda from John Harbaugh to Zachary Orr. This is his second season as a defensive coordinator. He struggled in the first half of the season. Lots and lots of adjustments made in the second half of the last season to get this defense competent, but it looks like they've regressed. At least after one game, we could say that. Q, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Zachary Orr with this defense? Does it look like it's one of those things where he may be in over his head, or do we just chalk this up as an aberration?
It's interesting when you look at a defense and you see the defensive staff, and that helps the defensive coordinator and the players, kind of the tentacles of him being able to communicate to all the different guys. And I like it. I like what I see. I like Matt Robinson. I like Chuck Pagano. I like Chuck Smith. I really have a high affinity for the entire staff. Their defensive line coach, dude, is amazing. He's high energy, very intelligent, shows a high IQ of football savviness to get his guys to play. Yet, for whatever the reason, it just isn't connecting. And so in that disconnect, I think that's something that is an issue when you look at what we're looking at and the lack of, one, pressure to stop Josh Allen. You're hearing now guys talk about how they weren't disciplined with the scheme and kind of doing a little soloing. That's something that is troubling. You look at the coverages that they were playing, and, you know, it's kind of a head scratcher as to, you know, some of the coverages, i.e., when you see Josh Allen and, you know, your coverage is designed to prevent, yet you allow for him to make an amazing play, and your numbers favor having it either be an incompletion or a tackle inbounds. It just, to me, seems that there is a big miscommunication going on, even though I have a high affinity for the coaching staff, even though I have a high affinity for some of their players. I think it needs to be corrected ASAP. And so, yes, if I am putting John Harbaugh in the crosshairs, I think we have to put Zach Orr, at least for this game, in the crosshairs of like, all right, what are you going to do to change and shift things around to hold this defense accountable?
Yeah, you have to put it on everybody here. It's Harbaugh, Monken, or player execution. Like, everybody deserves a piece of the pie here. Now, you know, how much of that pie does each person get? I think that's the thing that is up for debate among everybody. But, you know, it was just disappointing because you can see the writing on the wall. You know, they go up 40-25. You're feeling really good about it. But then you start to see just like chunk play after chunk play. Q, you and I talked about Roquan Smith this morning, talked about Jaire Alexander, some of these other players that just did not have good games. The pass rush, right? You know, the play calling itself was too lackadaisical, in my opinion. It was too soft. You know, they let the Bills carve up the defense, weren't necessarily being super aggressive with it. But Zach Orr also isn't out there making tackles and going out there and, trying to sack Josh Allen or bring down James Cook. So it is a two-way street where, yes, I think that the play calling wasn't as good as it needed to be in that fourth quarter, because we saw it was such a shift. And again, I've said it the whole week. This team was the Baltimore Ravens. They were the inverse of themselves, right? It wasn't the same team that we saw through the first three quarters. It was a different team. And that's what it feels like sometimes when they get up. It's, well, we have this in the bag. Let's just try to get out of here as quickly as we can. And the thing you cannot do, I said this on the show this morning with Q, Josh Allen is one of the few quarterbacks that if you leave that door cracked even just a little bit, he will slam that thing down and said, yeah, you played with us. Now you're about to regret it. Especially against a team, if this is a rookie quarterback or a guy without that experience, and you say, all right, we're just going to make things a little more, vanilla, things will be okay. Even then it's not okay. But when you do it against a guy that has the experience, he has shown the ability to come back and lead his team to victories. And again, it's like the big four, right? Lamar can do that. Josh can do that. Mahomes can do that. Burrow can do that. There are a lot of quarterbacks that can. It just comes down to philosophy. And kind of like what we said with the Ravens, they can't start 0-2. Well, as you mentioned, Zach Orr also can't afford to start slow like he did last year. And obviously they brought in Dean last year. And I think that collaborative effort helped. Q, you mentioned Chuck Pagano and those coaches on the defensive staff there. It's a collaborative effort there. But clearly they need to be better. They understand they need to be better. But again, it's enough of the talk, right? Go out there and show it. That's what we need. We saw what they could do in the second half of last season. We saw that it's possible. And arguably, in fact, it's not arguable. It is apparent that on paper, they are a better unit than they were last season. But of course, you don't play the games on paper. You got to show it on the field.
God, I wish you could play it on paper. That'd be fantastic because the Ravens have been
Cleveland would have 7 Super Bowl champs, and the Ravens would have this year. Exactly. That's what we get.
Oh my gosh, it would be a day to note if that was the case. But yeah, like you mentioned, the Ravens on defense, they need to figure it out. They played so soft, especially in the last few minutes of that game. They played Josh Allen like they played Joe Burrow. Has me worried about that Bengals game because the Ravens play very soft against Joe Burrow, and I think those DBs need to just man up and press on those receivers, especially the receivers of the Bills, who honestly aren't much to really sneeze at. Not to show any disrespect, but the Ravens' talent on DB is way more than the receiver, so I was very much expecting them to do something, but didn't happen. Let's turn over to the offense because yes, the Ravens scored 40 points, but they went conservative in the last 3 drives of this game, and it ultimately led to the Bills having a chance to come back. Todd Monken has been avoiding a little bit of criticism, and an offensive scores 40 points. I don't know how much you can criticize an offensive coordinator, but would you like to see more killer instinct out of this offense moving forward? The Ravens, for instance, in week 2 are up by 7 points with a chance to win the game. Would you want them to be more aggressive, or do you want them to wind the clock out? KL, I'll start with you. Do you think that the Ravens' approach in week 1 were lackadaisical, and do you expect them to put the pedal to the metal moving forward?
I mean, they have to put the pedal to the metal. The problem is, and like I've said, Lamar has begged and pleaded for that, and it worked for a little bit last year, but I guess now we're back, and they didn't do that. And this has been a problem with Todd Monken. For as good as he's been as the Ravens offensive coordinator, his units have either started really fast and then tapered off towards the end of games, or they started really slow and then picked it up. But by that point, sometimes it's too late. And, he saw some of the horizontal stuff with Zay Flowers worked at times in the game in week 1 against Buffalo, but you can't continue to go back to that well over and over again. I think he did that a little bit too much. And then of course, Justice Hill has that fumble, and even the players just running sideline to sideline, not even trying to get yards. So again, it's not all on Todd Monken, but we have seen in the past him getting too cute at times. And I think that's kind of what happened here. The Ravens, I think, they outsmart themselves. They outthink themselves. And look, I want to give credit to the Bills too, because they stuck with it. They could have easily just said, you know what? It's been a tough game for us. We're just going to pack it up. Week 2, here we come. And they said, no, we're going to stick with it. We're going to try to eke out that victory. Even at 99.1%, the Ravens are at, and they were able to get the job done. But you can't put yourself in that situation. And that's not even on Todd Monken. I mean, that's on the players too, right? Derrick Henry had a phenomenal game, but we can't sit here and not acknowledge the fact that Derrick Henry's fumble did change the course of that game. And Todd Monken wasn't the one out there, handling the ball and trying to get past all these Bills defenders, right? That was something. And, the offensive line, which I thought had great moments throughout the game, also had really loud losses throughout the game that impacted plays. Some Valele, some Rosengarten, like those things are all like many other mistakes as well. Like Tyler Loop, I thought had a really good debut, but it also had, he missed the extra point and had the kickoff out of bounds. So he wasn't perfect, unfortunately, although I thought that overall it was pretty positive for him. And then, you just some of the defensive lapses we talked about. So it's a whole group effort, but I think the Ravens, they need to get together. There's no other explanation.
Interesting because of the way Todd Monken called the game. Situational football technically calls for you to not slow things down as a negative, but control the tempo. And by controlling the tempo, you're up. There's no need for you to have to, throw deep ball shots down the field. There's no need to put your team in harm's way. I think that part of what was a failure, though, is how do you capture the overall team's momentum, which then goes back to John Harbaugh, because from a John Harbaugh aspect of things, you got to know the heartbeat of both sides, offense and defense, and they both have to be collaborative. And that's where I think for Todd Monken, shoot, my boys are rolling, and I'm calling plays based upon what I'm trying to do is get away from a defensive front that's really attacking my offensive line. So let me slow them down. Let me continue to do some misdirection. And it just didn't work. But I think, again, momentum with John Harbaugh and recognizing what was going on over on the defense side of the ball. Hey, Todd, this is what I'm seeing. Hey, let's make sure we're all on the same page to close out this game. And so that's where I think that there was the big miss. And then, of course, you talk about the big miss. We had, Tyler's dad on the show last week. And man, I know he must be feeling pretty sick to his stomach because of the fact that, every point counts. But then again, you look at Trent Simpson, and he has a special teams gaffe in his own right with not being able to simply down the ball at the 1 yard line. It is everyone taking their turn, offense, defense, special teams, that it's a head scratcher. And it's where, again, the head coach, situational football, making sure all scenarios are covered and everyone is on the same page, moment to moment. And that is the challenge that John Harbaugh has to face.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Let's talk about that Tyler Loop missed kick, because I'm not sure it should have even been a missed kick. The Ravens had a chance to go up 3 scores, decided to kick the field goal to try and make it a 16-point game instead of going for 2 and making a 17-point game. Do you agree with that decision, Q? Would you have gone for 2, or are you okay with making the Bills have to score 2 2-point conversions in order to get the win or tie up?
Yeah, the 2-point conversion, they were chasing points, if you will. And I think, for them chasing those points, it's an extra point for you. You're feeling really good about your offense. They just methodically marched down the field and scored. And you feel like you're in full command. It's an extra point. My guy was doing great with all his other kicks. And I you know what I mean? Like, there was no, I don't know, maybe we should go ahead and change it up and go for 2. I didn't sense that even when he went out there. But you then, of course, have revisionist history when he misses it. And you're like, mother of pearl. I think the big thing, he missing it, that was bad. But right before the half, not playing the prevent defense the correct way, technique-wise, that was even worse.
Yeah, look, and I was doing the watch along, and I thought that they were up by 3 possessions until I realized it was only 16. or sorry, 15 when he missed the extra point. And that to me was like, okay, boom, they're up 3 possessions this late in the game. So effectively the game is probably over. And then I'm like, wait a second, they're not up by 3 possessions. It's only 2 possessions. That to me is like during that moment, I was so convinced they were up there. I'm like, yeah, okay, this is good. The game's effectively over. So in my opinion, what I've gone for it, and again, like hindsight is 2020 and everything with that, we can talk about that with the 4th down. Like, and in my opinion changed on the watch along. I had said, I don't know, I might punt this thing and, force the defense. But then, looking back on it, literally like 12 hours later, I'm like, no, wait a second. Where'd that aggressive mentality go? Where's the Seattle Seahawks 2019 John Harbaugh on that 4th and 3, or, some of that aggressive style? And look, we know that Lamar said he was cramping, and he also took a shot from Ed Oliver, and maybe that had something to do with it as well in terms of him not wanting to go for it, or felt a little bit, he didn't feel well enough to go out there and go for it on that 4th and 3, it appears. But even like for the 2-point conversion to make it 3 possessions, yes, my final answer is I would have gone. And that's not just me speaking in hindsight. That is me effectively saying, if you don't get the 2, and this is even not even factoring in the missed extra point. If you don't get it, you're up by 15. That's still a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. You still are forcing the Bills to go out there and get the job done and hit a 2-point conversion. Like everything would have to go wrong. And obviously it did, but the other side of that is if you make it 3 possession game, that would be 99.99999. Keep it going percent to win that game. And I think that's something I would have personally done.
I get it where you're coming from. Both of you guys are right. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The Ravens had a 2-score lead. Probably should have got the job done, but they didn't. But we're not talking about the Bills-Ravens game anymore. We are moving on, getting ready for that Week 2 matchup. Home opener for the Baltimore Ravens against the Cleveland Browns. Joe Flacco is coming back. We'll touch on the injury report first because the Ravens did hold their first practice here on Wednesday, and we have a lot to talk on regarding that, but we'll touch on that next here on the Ravens Squad Show. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts for a fast project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. Join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCOLLEGE5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Okay, we are back here on the Ravens Squad Show. Thank you again for everybody who is joining in and listening on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that like button, and make sure that you tell a friend who's a Ravens fan about this. If they don't already know about the show, make sure they're tuning in. Also, make sure they're tuning into the Locked On Ravens podcast with Kevin Oestreicher. He is here Monday through Friday and maybe even the weekends, depending on the news source. To get your Ravens news daily, make sure you tune in for him to get his up-to-date information, because that is a way to get your news source for sure. Ravens are going to move on, as are we, to the Cleveland Browns. They are preparing for the game as we speak. They held practice on Wednesday. There are injuries to note. Jaire Alexander still dealing with that knee injury. He was limited in practice on Wednesday. Isaiah Likely still nursing that foot injury, as Patrick Ricard is with his calf. They did not practice, and newly inputted into the report, Nnamdi Madubuike is dealing with an ankle injury. He did not practice, but John Harbaugh did state that he is likely that he is going to practice tomorrow, so we will be looking at that as the week progresses. Let's talk about this injury to Isaiah Likely and Pat Ricard, because I think that the right side of that offensive line really struggled in that Bills game, and Rosengarten was a guy who was known to get help from both the fullback and the tight end in certain situations. We saw the lack of that in this contest because of those injuries, and the Ravens were really forced to lean on Rosengarten. Obviously, it was a disappointing affair for him. Do you see that being an issue again in this contest with Myles Garrett, most likely Hall of Famer coming in? Q, I'll start with you. What are your concerns with this injury? It looks like Isaiah Likely is still not able to play. Pat Ricard most likely not playing either. Are you concerned about that matchup heading into week 2?
I don't don't necessarily feel that anyone can match up one-on-one effectively with Myles Garrett. I also will say Jaire actually had a really strong game filling in for Pancake Pat. And so if Pat Ricard can't go, we know that Jaire can go and play that fullback position. We also know that Charlie Kolar has done a fabulous job of doing his job as far as being a tight end blocking / tight end going out on routes. So do you give help is, I guess, the question for Roger Rosengard. And in my mind, absolutely gives him help, because if you look at the video and you check out what he was doing, he was having his moments just as much as if you were looking at Daniel Faalele, who was having his moments as well. So I think the way in which you help yourself is by having a little extra over to that side to protect. And then, test Myles Garrett ability to either run laterally, get him fatigued, get him kind of on his horses, maybe potentially run some plays towards him, maybe run some misdirection, blocking scheme-wise towards him. So there are multitude of ways to do it, but as far as, yes, flat out having the personnel, I think both Jaire and Charlie Kolar are showing they're far more than capable of giving help to Roger Rosengard.
Right. I think that obviously, you want Isaiah back out there, but I was very impressed with what I saw from both Charlie and Jaire in the game on Sunday night. And, obviously Myles Garrett is a heck of a force to deal with. He's had battles with a lot of people, and, Ronnie Stanley in particular. We know the viral clip that happened between him and Rosengarten last year. Like, he's a force. And, when you talk about kind of what happened to the Ravens towards the end of this game against the Bills sent a lot of pressure at Lamar, but blitzing Lamar doesn't really work, for being honest. Like, he has gotten so good and so quick with his decision making. Only a couple of those plays actually worked when it came to the Bills sending a lot of pressure, because if you don't get that pressure right off the bat, Lamar is going to either scramble out and find someone, or he's just going to see someone wide open and just toss the ball there. Like, he's so good at that. So how do you combat that? Well, you don't blitz. You drop more guys back into coverage, and how do you do that successfully? When you have a guy like Myles Garrett, who can absolutely game wreck the game by himself, win quickly by himself. And so if Rosengarten struggles in this game and, you want to send help over there, I think they absolutely should. They should do everything in their power, right? Make someone else beat you, right? If Myles Garrett beats you, that to me is a problem, because it's like we talked about for all last year with those number one wide receivers. It was like, please don't let Devontae Adams beat you with Las Vegas. What happened? Devontae Adams beat you. Please don't let, Jamar Chase beat you in Cincinnati. Jamar Chase almost beat you twice. Now, luckily they got out of those games, but it was that consistent theme of like, there's a clear number one receiver. Don't let that guy beat you. And the Ravens couldn't do it last year. So this is the same scenario, just flip to the defensive side of the ball. Don't let Myles Garrett beat you. Make someone else on that defense go crazy. Make someone else on that defense step up, because we know Myles Garrett can do it. So, look, I think the offensive line, the Browns are going to try to exploit the weaknesses there. We know that, and we know that they can be there when they lose loud. It happens. But luckily for the Ravens, I do think they're going to come out extra motivated. Does that mean they're going to win? Of course not. They have to actually play the game and win for a full 60 minutes. But I think that they had some positive stuff to build on the offensive line, and they just have to clean up the negatives.
I hope they do. I really hope they do. I think the Ravens do a good job against the Browns, because they really just play away from Myles Garrett, it looks like. But it'll be up to the Browns to find a way to make him a presence, regardless of what the game plan is for the Ravens against him. So we'll see. Another personal injury report, Jaire Alexander, still dealing with that knee injury. He was limited in practice again. It felt like he wasn't the same Jaire that we saw in Green Bay. I'm not sure if it's because of the injury or because of lack of practice. Q, you've been there since training camp. What you saw from Jaire earlier in the preseason isn't what we saw from him in that week one matchup. Is there something we're missing here with him, or do you think that knee injury is likely still bothering him?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of a few things. I know the knee injury, the PCL, the way, he and his father felt like it was rehabbed and treated in Green Bay was one way. Again, you come here to the Ravens, you have a level of freshness. And in that level of freshness, you also have John Harbaugh's training camp, and his training camp practice and the way the Ravens do things is notoriously challenging and difficult. Period. In the discussion, both former and current players will let you know that those training camp practices are hard. And again, it clearly put a strain on him to the point where whatever he needed to get cleaned up and looked at as far as maybe it was a scope and there was some debris floating around and had to get cleaned up. We don't know. We will probably never know unless he comes out and says it. But I do also recognize this, that those missed practices and the lack of getting out there and working on your craft, it showed up in the game. He did not look like anywhere close to the ability to play the man-to-man coverage that we were hoping that he was going to play and kind of take care of the coverage that he needed to take care of. And, he'll be the first one to tell you, like, competitively, pass interference is just not it. An upper tier corner recognizes that that's like the last line of defense, and that's not it. Now, I'll also say this, that when you have great coverage, that means that you got great pressure on the quarterback. One thing begets the other. If you got great coverage, that means the quarterback has to hold the ball. If you're getting pressure on the quarterback, that means the quarterback's going to be trying to get rid of the ball, and that's going to give you opportunities to create interceptions. So both needed to happen against the Bills, and it did not. You're going to get a guy in Joe Flacco who can sling it around, but if you watch that Bengals game, the times that he struggled and they created turnovers is when, there was pressure in his face, and he couldn't get rid of the ball the way he wanted to. So this is yet another challenge where the secondary is going to be hoping that the guys get to Joe Flacco. But then on the other side of it all, you better hope and pray that, hey, man, I know I got to go ahead and lock in on my coverage because Joe Flacco is going to be coming to you, and he's going to be slinging that ball.
Yeah, Jaire needs a big bounce back here. Obviously, he's still dealing with the knee like we talked about him. Him not being able to practice for a long, like everything, right? It all kind of amounted to what we saw on Sunday night. I think he's a better player than that, and he better be, considering how much I begged and pleaded for him on this show for years for the Ravens to go get him. So I need this to work just for me personally. But I do think that, there's something to be said specifically also with how they utilized him and Chidobe Awuzie, where I think Awuzie is going to be a much bigger factor this year. I think everybody kind of dismissed him once Jaire signed, of like, he's just going to be relegated to backup duty, not really play a lot. Some of the beauty of having a lot of guys, and honestly, two oft injured players, both Jaire and Chidobe Awuzie, is you can play them in rotation, limit their snaps, and still get the maximum potential out of both of them alongside Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins. Those plays where Jaire got picked on, it was just difficult to watch because he came in to be a difference maker, and he was a difference maker just in the wrong way on Sunday night. And that play, where he trips up Keon Coleman, it's just such a simple play that, that should be like the second thing you're taught as a defender, is like when a guy's about to score late in a game to take the lead and it's 2 points or less, just let the guy score, give the ball back to your offense. They just ran the clock down.
I was at Ravens training camp practice. Literally. So if you've not been to a Ravens training camp practice, one of the fields, if you can imagine north, south, east, west, two fields are facing east and west. And then there's a third field that faces north and south. For all intent purposes, I was on the north side of the one end zone, and you can see where they were practicing that scenario to the point where when it was the offense's time to do that scenario, they had another. I don't know. I think it was. I forget who the quarterback was. It was maybe Justice Hill or something like that. He was like the quarterback because no quarterback liked to throw interceptions. So you're trying to just intentionally throw it, an interception, and you just want to get rid of the ball. At the same time, you're also having guys practice kind of going down and really going down at the 5 as opposed to going in and being careful about sliding into the end zone. They went over all of those scenarios. That's where it's frustrating to me that, if he's not out there, then he's missing out on an opportunity for the possibility of that happening. And it clearly happened week 1. And so, it's not that they weren't prepared. That's where I'm saying, like, from a head coaching standpoint, talk to your coordinator to say, hey, this is the situation that's going on. You got to be able to read the team and like, man, we are losing momentum. Boy, we need the ball back. Let's figure out what do we need to do to get the ball back. Hey, tell your guys, look, if we don't want them to get a big play, but if they get a big play, we got to let them score. You got to have everybody communicating to one another the scenario that you went over during training camp. That's head coaching 101.
Couldn't have said it better.
Cannot say it better. That was the crucial error. Man, hopefully they bounce back again. We're trying not to talk about the Bills game too much, but sometimes you can't help it, especially when talking about what these guys will need to do in week 2. Speaking of week 2, when we come back, we'll touch on the game, get our predictions, our thoughts on the matchups as the Ravens will look to go 1-1. They cannot afford to fall to 0-2, even though they did last year and bounce back. The Ravens will want to get this one, and it's a divisional matchup, so it's even more important that they get the job done. We'll touch on it here next on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. You can just move through life, or you can find the things that move you. It's your choice. You can choose to get out there, choose your people. You can choose to go for it, like really go for it. Just choose to do something that moves you. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, we are back here, Raven Squad Show. Again, we are available twice a week, once on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m., and then once after every Ravens game. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching, and if you're listening, wherever you listen to your podcast, be sure to give it 5 stars and comment. It'll really help the show out. The Ravens move forward to face the Cleveland Browns, a big-time matchup. In the last game, the Ravens weren't able to really get much of a pass rush. The Ravens will need to do more of that in this contest, I believe. And if you look back at what the Bengals and Browns went through, as Q mentioned, Joe Flacco was under the most scrutiny when he was in pressure. When he was under pressure, he threw a lot of those interceptions. Kevin, let me start with you. Who do you think needs to step up the most on this defense, considering what Joe Flacco has to go up against in this Ravens squad?
Well, I think the thing with Joe is we understand who he is as a player, and that dates back to his days in Baltimore, which is he is honestly, it's not quite the level Jameis Winston is, but last year when they faced Jameis Winston, he is a all or nothing quarterback in a way where Joe has the arm. He can sling that ball deep. We know that he has the veteran savvy, but when Joe is off of his game, he's a turnover machine. And, we saw that even with Cleveland the first time around when that Texans divisional round game, he was just throwing pick six after interception after pick six. And that's what the Ravens need. And you know what that would do for the Ravens if the defense was able to get that going? I think it would go a long way with confidence for them. A team that is emphasizing forcing turnovers, a team that did not get one against the Bills. Here's something. I'm going to say something that's going to be absolutely crazy. You want to know the last turnover the Ravens defense forced? Do either of you have a guess? Do you know the answer to this question?
I mean, period?
Yeah. The last time they forced a turnover.
The last turnover the Ravens forced. You know when it was?
That they recovered. I got you. Go ahead. Cincinnati when Marlon?
I believe, and I'm looking it up now because I need to make sure.
You thought you had it off the top of your head.
You thought you had it.
I did, but now I'm second guessing myself. I don't want to look. We are not in the business of spreading. No, I'm correct. You know what it was? I shouldn't have second guessed myself. Michael Pierce intercepting Bailey Zappi in Week 18
It was
against the Cleveland Browns.
Yes.
That was the last turnover this defense forced. All right, I shouldn't have second guessed myself. I knew I had that on lock.
Nate Wiggins had the pick 6.
Yeah, but that was that same game. Yep. So it was Michael Pierce. Man, I'm so mad I second guessed myself. But you know what? That to me shows kind of like in the big spots, in the big moments, the Ravens need to step up in that regard. Now, this is a game where it's not necessarily like you're playing a top team or a team that's a contender. But you know what? This is an AFC North game. Divisional games always have that weird thing to it. They literally lost to the Browns last season when they couldn't catch an interception. They couldn't do it. Hamilton dropped the game. Eddie Jackson had one of the worst games I've ever seen. And, I don't like saying that, but it's true. I mean, it was awful. You have an opportunity to get yourself back on track, even if it's against a not so great team. And if you can do that and carry that momentum into a huge Monday night game against Detroit, all it takes is one game to get yourself going. I think the Ravens, if they're able to do that, can be in a good spot. You cannot let the negative momentum of what happened at the end of that week 1 game impact you, especially when you do have a quarterback like Joe Flacco, who, if you play him right, can jumpstart your defense with a couple of quick turnovers.
Signed Jadeveon Clowney right before we play against the Cleveland Browns so he can get ready to go out there and play really well against Jared Goff. I said it.
You did. Good job.
Okay. All right. I've been holding that in for a long time.
Visited the Cowboys, by the way.
Kevin Oestreicher is right. Mother of pearl. Woo.
Oh, man.
Carry on the show, fellas. Carry on.
But Heezy said that he met with the Dallas Cowboys today, which is correct. Yes. Jadeveon Clowney did. Has not signed a contract yet, so there's still a chance. We shall see.
We need to get him now.
Yeah, I agree with you. What about the Browns defense? Because I know the Bengals aren't really known for their rush defense in this game, but the Browns did hold the Bengals to a pedestrian amount of yards. In fact, Chase Brown had 43 yards rushing on 21 attempts, 2.0 average. And then, of course, Joe Burrow had 2 rushes for 3 yards, which is a meaning thing. The Bengals are not the Ravens in terms of rushing the football, but Q, I wonder if the Myles Garrett addition may stifle Derrick Henry a little bit, or do you think that this Ravens offense will keep on rolling with Derrick Henry leading the charge?
No, I think Derrick Henry, knowing his professionalism and how he's been feeling, hell hath no fury, like the juggernaut scorned. I think he will show that him letting his team down by fumbling was an anomaly. I think at the same time, Warhop, the Ravens offensive line coach, is interesting how, you see how the Ravens offensive line really struggled and I mean, good God, on the 19-yard run, which looked more like 65 yards, but the 19-yard run that Lamar Jackson had, that was amazing. And you saw the pirouette of non-blocking by Daniel Fa'alele. I think Warhop is going to be, really on both those guys on the right side. And so the combination of I got to prove my worth as an offensive line and the redemption element of the mindset of Derrick Henry, I'm really excited to see how they're going to go out and play and get things started and going. I really think this might be, a bludgeoning type of a performance, which I am totally fine with. Like, get all that frustration out, celebrate, the 30 years history and all the pomp and circumstance that's going to be out there in pregame and all that. But man, when that whistle is blown and the Ravens offense takes the field, yeah, I want to see a really pissed off, motivated Roger Rosengarten and Daniel Fa'alele. And then, of course, Derrick Henry Derrick Henry really doesn't need to do much. When I say don't need to do much, I'm saying that, yeah, of course, hold it high and tight. However, you're already valid, bro. Just continue to be valid and do your thing.
Yeah. I mean, they need to have a bounce back. I can't deal with another 0-2 start where they lose to a team like the Raiders, and then you're having all those conversations, and then you're going to play, or I guess Detroit's coming to play Baltimore on Monday night. It's a home game, but that's something that can't happen. And again, like, you started off strong with divisional. And again, we talk about the Bills and the head-to-head record, and that's something where I know a lot of people are already kind of out on the Ravens getting the 1 seed. And it's early, but we could definitely see that loss come back to bite them in December when they are fighting for seeding, hopefully. But don't have it happen like it did last year, especially because that AFC North record, divisional record, is very important when it comes to seeding. Conference record is very important when it comes to seeding. You start in the conference 0-2 again. I mean, that's really tough. So I think that the Ravens defense, they have everything they need to, especially on the ground. Look, this is a defense right now that is worse than the league in terms of EPA defensively. That comes from True Media. But then you also have just the general stats that this is the best offense in the league right now in almost every category. They're number 1 in pass offense, number 1 in rush offense as well. But then you go down to that defense, and they're the 14th best rushing defense at 3.5 yards per attempt, which isn't a terrible number. It's week 1, so it'll even out over time. I expect Baltimore to be a top run defense again. That passing defense is number 27 in yards per attempt, number 32 in total yards. The Browns receiver-wise, Jerry Jeudy is there, Cedric Tillman is there. Outside of that, there really aren't a ton of threats. I mean, David Njoku at the tight end position, right? That's a guy that you got to worry about a little bit. And Harold Fannin actually is someone, a rookie tight end for them, who makes a nice duo with Njoku over there. But I do think that, look, the Bills don't have a star receiver either, but I think they have more threats on their offense as a whole. I think the Browns' talent drops off pretty substantially after a Cedric Tillman, and you kind of have guys that you can work around. Like, I'd feel confident and comfortable with Jaire Alexander on a Jamari Thrash, for example, or one of those other receivers there. Like, I'm fine with that. I just think that Cleveland, to me, is a team that is clearly not competing for a Super Bowl. This is a team you can get right against, and I think that they need to take that challenge and understand that, they can't just show up and expect to win. They've, not that I think that's their mindset when they lose to bad teams, but, something just doesn't click when that happens. You need to be able to get off to a better start than you did last year. You have to start fast. I mean, Nick has come on this show, Nick Moore, the Ravens long snapper, and said, he said it on a bunch of different programs, that the next game is the most important game. That's how it works, right? You got to go out there and perform each and every week. You got to treat every week like it's its own thing. So get back on a saddle and hopefully pick up a win. That's what they need to do.
Let's hope they do pick up a win. Let's talk about it. Let's get the predictions going. Ravens versus Browns, week 2 season opener at home. Q, I'll start with you. How do you think this goes?
Well, I'm hoping that it's riding the momentum again of what the history of the Baltimore Ravens has been. A better performance defensively. Obviously, the shift is no longer this dominant, crushing defense, but more along the lines of a Lamar Jackson, awesome, dope offense. And so I want to see that. I want to see the Baltimore Ravens go out and just put their thumb on a division opponent, which is incredibly difficult to do. I don't want to see any special team gaffes. I want to see a present John Harbaugh. I want to see a John Harbaugh that understands the tactics of the game and be able to implement it, and you'll be able to see it be implemented. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And I think this Ravens game, or this Ravens team, if they're saying they're now ready, this is as pivotal of a game as any game that they're going to play. You cannot, division-wise, okay, sure, the Raiders last year, but this is a division opponent. And last I checked, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they got to win, and you ain't trying to go down and be in a scenario where you're trying to get a cheap wild card berth, go on the road to play someone in the playoffs. You're trying to control your destiny. This right here matters. Division games are like worth 2.5 when it comes to having to win. Critical. Joe Flacco is not Josh Allen. If y'all don't want us to start beating the Jadeveon Clowney drum, well then go out there and show that Joe Flacco can't just sling it around on you. you're going to have to go ahead and get at him. Unleash Mike Green.
Yes.
I would love it. They need some juice there. So yeah, I think the Ravens, I'm going to believe in them. Maybe it's a mistake, but I'm going to believe in them. I'm going to say they take care of business. They're going to bounce back in this game. There's no way it can happen 2 years in a row. I can't wrap my head around believing that is going to happen. So I'm going to pick the Ravens. I'm going to say it'll be something like 27-13 is I think what my final score will be. Although I think the Ravens offense has potential to put up more points than that. But again, you got to go out there and play the games. Doesn't matter what aspirations are, what goals you have as a team for this year. Those guys out there on the field, they're trying to win. So go out there and get the job done.
Yep. Hard to disagree with you. I think the Ravens come in and blow out the Browns. I think it's going to be a defining performance. They have to win this game. Lots of animosity here for the week 1 start. I think the Ravens win. I'm going to say 35-6. I think the Ravens are going to just take care of business in this one. I'm not too concerned with the play of the offensive line. I think Mike Green gets 2 sacks. I think the Ravens rock and roll and head over to Detroit. Well, Detroit comes to Baltimore for that Monday Night Football game, and they show out in that game as well. But we'll get to touch on that next week. For now, thank you guys so much for joining us here on the Raven Squad Show. Remember to like and subscribe if you're listening or watching on YouTube. And if you're listening, wherever you listen to your podcast, be sure to give us 5 stars and comment. Make sure you also tune in to tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Ravens podcast with Kevin Oestreicher as he gets us ready for that big-time Ravens-Browns divisional game. For myself, Kevin Oestreicher, and Kadri Ismail, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you after the Sunday game against the Cleveland Browns.